and I'm going to be doing the phantom word illusion. So how do auditory illusions work? Ben Carson split it up in 3 different ways. So first of all, we only have 3.5 thousand receptors sending signals to our brain versus the 126 million receptors that we have in our eyes. So obviously this leaves room for us to fail at hearing things at times. The second reason is because of sound waves. So for example, if I was in a classroom and there was a person in the back of the room and a person in the front of the room while I was giving the lesson, the person in the back of the room is probably not going to hear me as well because of the different sound waves that are bouncing off of different stimuli, like the desk or the chair, different people in the room, the walls, than if the person in the front of the room heard me because the sound waves are hitting less things in order for the person to be able to hear me. The third reason is because of multiple stimuli happening at once. So if I were outside and I was talking to a neighbor, but there was dogs barking, lawnmower going, cars passing and honking, then it would be harder for us to hear each other because of all of the things happening around us. So even though we're close to each other and not far away like we are in a classroom, it's still hard for us to hear each other because of the different things surrounding us. Because of these different ways that auditory illusions can happen, Dr. Chen came up with psycholinguistic tasks in order to pinpoint how these auditory illusions come to play. So the first one is lexical decision. In this, we look at words versus non-words. We hear a series of words, and then we try to classify which ones are actually words and which ones aren't. Silent reading is just whenever you're reading to yourselves, not saying a word at all and processing it. And then semantic decision is taking something that you know and connecting it to something else. So for example, I see a cloud, I connect it to my best friend Skylar because it has sky in it. So I think clouds and Skylar. So semantic decision just takes two things that you know and connects them together. The phantom word illusion is known by Chico and Louis to be a word or phrase that is heard in its original sound. So for example, if I say the word tan and you hear the word can or Sam, that's a phantom word illusion because it's hearing something different than what is actually being heard. Naminsky said that this was linked to the fuzzy trace theory, and this theory has to do with how we process words. So whenever we process these words, our brain pulls these different things together, and once we pinpoint what it is, we know it to be true as facts. So that's why it's hard to rewire things whenever we are told that things are differently, and we learned it that way. So that's why it's important to learn it right the first time, as Ramon says. So whenever you do this phantom words illusion, you need to make sure that you're using appropriate words. So you are also tricking the brain, but you also need to make sure that you're trying to listen to the right word because you might hear it as something else and it might be hard for you to tell yourself that you're actually not hearing that word. Leading on, Roman says that non-words and words are very important for the environment that you're basing this on. So if you're doing this word illusion, then you need to be mindful of the surrounding around you because there's different language that's used in the South, that's used in the North, and it's used in their own regions of your state. So you need to be mindful of your words because some people see things as words and some people see things as non-words. So phantom words and truth reality is we are trying to figure out what we hear and what we don't hear. So what we hear, if it's true that we're hearing this, and what we're not hearing that we should be hearing, and then based on that, we're going to come up with a good or bad experience for the world. It could be different based on the person. Some people could take this as a good, some people could take it as a bad. All that matters is how we move forward with it. For example, Heidegger uses elderly in hearing loss. So as we age, we lose our hearing, and we start to hear things that aren't really happening in our world. And some people could see this as a good experience, only meaning in the fact that they don't mind when people help them with their hearing, with the words that they may not be picking up on. When some people might see this as a bad experience, as if they're being lied to and conned, and that the world is untrustworthy, so they might isolate themselves. So it's very important, however we process these things, how we move on from it. So whenever I was setting up this experiment for the phantom words illusion, I first used Deutsch's auditory illusions, and then I used a voice recorder, and then on my iPhone 7 Plus, then my Lenovo ThinkPad with a US iPhone USB cable. I'm sorry. So what I did is I listened to Deutsch's auditory illusions, and the illusions that I heard, the frequency varied from low to high, but the pitch was always high. And so I made my own little twist on it. So first of all, I had to choose my phenom, and I chose cow, and then I made 4 different auditory illusions. I made a high frequency, high pitch for 30 seconds, low frequency, high pitch for 30 seconds. All of my auditory illusions were 30 seconds, but my spin on it is I used a high frequency, low pitch, and then I used a low frequency, low pitch. So I added the low pitch as my own little twist to this experiment. So then after I got done with those recordings, I sent them from my iPhone 7 Plus to my computer via my iPhone USB cable, and then I uploaded those audio recordings into a video file to YouTube. And this is my demonstration. So for the phantom words illusion, it created a connection to a couple of my classes. The first one was peace building and social justice. So in this, we had to focus on communication and how to do it in a peaceful way, but sometimes it led to violence. So how I related this to is that when you're saying things in a peaceful way, you're going to use a lower frequency with maybe even a lower pitch to seem like in a calm manner than if you were violent and you were using it in a higher frequency and a higher pitch, because we tend to use our voice higher when we're trying to get our voice across. Another thing that lines up with this is the Martian monologue experiment by Andrus and Miller. So in this experiment, they had these people listening to Martian language, and they got them familiar with it, and then later on they had them listen to all these words, and then they said, is this a Martian word or is this not? So it all just ties in on how people hear things, like what, even if it sounds foreign to them, like how do they hear it? My next class focus is Introduction to Creative Writing, and it's an arts class, and it focuses on choosing your words carefully. So in this, it's important that we choose our words carefully, because whenever you're reading them or whenever you're saying them out loud, then they are processed differently. Like even when we read them inside our heads, we sometimes stumble over words, even if we don't read them out loud. So it's important that whenever we're doing this, you're paying close attention because of this spontaneous false memory that Raina talks about. She says that because of the spontaneous false memory, like I said previously, once you learn something, it's hard to backtrack. Yes, it is easier with words because then we go, that says Dan, and then we can move on, but if it happens more and more, then it's hard to rewire your brain to balance that out. But this not only happens in classes, it also happens in the real world. So for politicians, their whole thing is they are trying to get their point across to the audience. They're trying to get their voice heard and people to be on their side. Unfortunately, for humans, we can only do so much. So as Manting says, we have a selective auditory attention. So what that means is that we cannot pay attention to too many things at once, or else we don't pick up on it. It's hard for us to do a lot of things at once. Another reason why politicians use these phantom words, or how they can be used to their benefit instead of a disadvantage for the audience, is that they use doctored footage. And what they do is they mix up the frequency in which the doctored footage is presented in order to make it seem as if they are in the right, making other people seem wrong, and that all has to do with pitch, frequency, and loudness. So in conclusion, our different locations in the world equal different perspectives. You could either be in the classroom setting and not be hearing things because of that, or you could be side by side by someone and you still don't hear it. So auditory illusions can occur very easily, as you see. It's because of our lack of receptors, and it allows us to be naive, our ears to be naive, and hear things that that aren't actually happening in the world. But what is the most important thing about this illusion is how we perceive the world and how we're going to move forward with this experience. Thank you for listening.